I once heard a dietitian tell their clients that if they train while fasted, their body will end up losing all its muscle because it's easier for the body to break down muscle as an energy source than it is to burn fat. Huh?
I want you to imagine that you have a cabin in the forest, and it's a very cold forest, so you have a fireplace inside the cabin. And every day you have to go out and collect 3 pieces of wood to put into that fireplace. And those 3 pieces of wood are what keep you warm and keep you alive. And you have to make sure that fire always stays alive. If you collect any less... Now some days you go and you collect a bit too much wood. So what you do is, instead of just getting rid of it, you put it into the corner to keep it for the future when you need it. Most days you get just enough, but some days you get too much, so maybe 4 or 5 pieces of wood. And eventually that pile of wood in the corner grows bigger and bigger. Now let's say one day you can't go out to get wood. Are you going to start ripping the walls down off of the side of your cabin and throwing that into the fire to keep you warm? Probably not. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to dig into that pile in the corner of the room. In this analogy, the different uses of the wood are the different ways our body uses calories and energy. So the structure of the cabin itself, which is made out of wood, is the way our body uses protein and calories to actually build our physical structure, i.e. our muscles and our bones. The wood that goes straight into the fireplace is the calories we burn on our everyday life just to stay alive and continue to function normally. And the pile of wood in the corner is the same way our body uses fat. When we have an excess of calories, our body doesn't just get rid of it. It instead stores it in case we need it in the future. Which is why what this dietitian said is so stupid. Our body isn't going to start breaking down our actual physical structure and using the components that keep us together as an energy source before it uses the stockpile that it kept in the first place. And this is one of the problems when it comes to information relating to diet, is there is a lot of misinformation.
Red meat provides us with colon cancer.
Here are 3 things I wish I knew a year ago before going carnivore, then eventually animal-based.
Protein shakes are really bad.
Can you elaborate?
It takes 3 years to digest 1 scoop of protein shake, by the way.
A lot of vegetables are poison.
Broccoli is bullshit.
If soy is feminizing, then show me the fucking evidence, Paul.
If you've spent any time trying to get diet advice online, you'll notice that it's full of contradictions, fear-mongering, and over-the-top statements. Like, this food's gonna give you cancer, and this food's gonna kill you, and this is the worst thing you can possibly put into your body. And this is because for as long as people have no longer had to worry about starving to death, and we've had an abundance of food and calories, people have tended to eat a little bit too much because we're designed to. And when we eat a little bit too much, we end up putting on some weight. And that is a matter of insecurity. And in fact, the biggest insecurity that most people have for the past few decades has been their body image. And when there's an insecurity to be taken advantage of, out crawl the scam artists, charlatans, con men, and snake oil salesmen. And there are a few areas as badly infected with this group as diet. Because of this, there's so much noise and actually so little quality information about how to eat and actually lose weight. And you'll probably notice that everybody thinks they're an expert, but a lot of people just give really terrible advice. Namely things like bread is going to make you fat, you can't eat eggs because the cholesterol is going to cause your heart to stop, you can't have butter, and a bunch of other crazy ideas which just factually aren't actually true. There have been some pretty wild examples of diets that have been spread in the past and currently, and some of these diets seem way too insane to be true, but they actually are. Like the tapeworm diet, where people swallowed tapeworms and allowed them to grow in their body, so the tapeworm would take all of their calories so it couldn't be absorbed into their actual body as actual fuel. Or perhaps the doctor-prescribed cigarette diet of the 1920s, which had people puff down a cancer stick every time they felt a pang of hunger, so they didn't put on any of that deadly fat. Screw the lungs though. Or perhaps even the cotton ball diet, where people put a bunch of cotton in their stomach to fill it without actual calories so that they'd feel full without actually having to eat. Or my favorite, and the only one that I can actually condone for the modern age, the drinking man's diet, in which you drank a bunch of booze instead of eating carbs so that you wouldn't put on fat. Fantastic. Until Harvard had the audacity to claim that drinking for every single meal wasn't as good as the creator of the pamphlet had his audience believe. By the way, 2 million copies of the Drinking Man's Diet were sold, meaning for a while, alcoholism was actually believed by many to be a good and effective diet. And you might think that with the modern age and access to the internet and all this free, available information, people have become more educated about how diet works. Unfortunately, this is not the case. Extremes are pushed super hard by almost everybody. You have the carnivores screaming that you should only be eating meat, and a lot of vegans saying that meat's going to give you cancer and you should only eat plant-based food. Keto and Banting people treat carbs like they are the devil. And a lot of people think that you have to cut out absolutely everything you love in order to effectively lose weight. This particular narrative has been pushed by our favorite on-screen stars, who like to say that they got as big as they are by eating nothing but chicken, rice, and broccoli, forgetting to mention the fact that they pump themselves full of steroids. And there are a few different things that people get wrong about the way we eat and how diet works. Here are a few examples going back to that cabin analogy. The first incorrect method that people use to try lose weight is they'll try and stoke the fire hotter in the cabin so that it burns 4 pieces of wood instead of the 3 that it was burning before. And the problem is this causes your appetite to fire up, and so you want to eat more. If you were in the cabin, that fire is burning really hot, so you go get more wood to throw into it. And the problem is, you might end up getting too much wood once again, building up that pile even bigger than before. A hardcore cardio session will maybe burn a couple hundred calories, which is great and can work if you continue to eat the same. But the problem is, doing those hardcore cardio sessions causes you to have a bigger appetite, and you end up eating more. And the problem is, you eat more than the calories you burnt off. Considering having 2 chocolate bars will undo all of the work you did with that cardio session, and you might end up collecting more wood to put into the corner again. And so, you eat too much and you put on even more fat. Another option that a lot of people might use is to stop bringing in wood completely, or to bring in a lot less wood. This is where the analogy gets a little bit shaky, but bear with me. Imagine you really like going out to get wood. It's a lot of fun for you. Specifically, you like going out and getting big chunks that burn very fast in the fire. Imagine you restrict yourself to only going outside of the cabin and picking up little twigs and then supplementing it with that pile of wood in the corner. Yes, it will work and you will lose a lot of that fat. But when you eventually do go out to collect wood again, you're going to end up going overboard and collecting way too much wood and potentially piling up that pile once again as high as it was. This is what happens when people do crash diets, where they severely reduce their calories, cut out all the food they enjoy in their life, and go back to eating nothing but celery sticks, boiled chicken breasts, and broccoli. Unfortunately, people are meant to enjoy food, and we are physiologically designed to try to eat the food that we enjoy eating. Very calorically dense, high in sugar type of food. And if you cut out everything you enjoy, you're likely going to rebound, and potentially very hard. You'll think that all your hard work has allowed you to start shoveling pizza, donuts, burgers, and everything fatty and salty and good into your mouth after your diet. But the problem is that'll undo a lot of the work that you did. Another common, somewhat ineffective solution that people will use is they'll think they need to get a different kind of wood. And this can be true, and I'll explain later why that's the case. But a lot of the time what people do is they'll get that different, better wood, put it in, and just end up getting the same amount that they did before, which just stays in the storage. And it can work, but you have to do it effectively. So how can we actually effectively get rid of that pile of wood in the corner? You could make your cabin bigger, because a bigger cabin needs more heat. It'll take a lot of effort up front and may need some maintenance, but it will mean that the fire can burn a lot more wood and likely less will go into the pile. This would be by putting on muscle, by training to get bigger and stronger. This is my favorite method because it doesn't mean you have to completely cut out a lot of the foods you like. You just have to eat with a purpose in mind. And as a side benefit, you'll look better and you'll be bigger and stronger and more healthy. This applies to men and women. By training for hypertrophy, i.e. to put on muscle, instead of training to lose fat, you will actually, as a consequence and byproduct, lose a lot more fat in the process. This is because putting on muscle increases your metabolic rate. Basically, it takes more energy for you to live if you have more muscle on you. And so your body will need to use a lot more calories in order to live your daily life. What you're essentially doing is making that fire burn hotter all the time, instead of doing quick bursts. That slow and constant burn is likely going to use a lot more of that fat than quick, sudden bursts of energy. Putting on muscle also improves a lot of different aspects of your life. Neck pain, headaches, a lot of those things will disappear if you've got strength in your back and in your neck. One concern for a lot of women is they think if they touch a weight, they're going to look like Mr. Olympia. Don't worry. How many guys do you know who go to the gym every single day for years and track their diet who just kind of look like normal dudes? It takes a lot of steroids, a lot of food, and a lot of effort to look like Mr. Olympia. In fact, who you're more likely to look like is that toned movie star who you think just does cardio. They probably lift a lot of weights. Now, this method does actually require you to use that using a different wood analogy that I used before. You see, not all wood is created equal. The best wood for the fire is not the best wood to build the cabin. And what I'm referring to is protein. Now, protein is an essential part for not only building the cabin, but it also works for not using as much wood. Protein is built up of these things called amino acids. And our body uses these amino acids to repair and build muscle, our bones, and a couple of other important things like neurotransmitters and hormones. And so it's very important to make sure you get enough protein to operate efficiently. Protein also takes more energy to digest than carbs or fat. So 50 calories worth of protein will digest less calories than 50 calories worth of carbs or fat, because your body uses more energy to digest those 50 calories and break them down. And so if you eat more protein, you'll feel more satiated, and you will also not put on all those calories that you would get from carbs or fat. Now, unfortunately, not all protein is created equal. This gets a little bit complicated, so I'll let you watch this video in the description below. But a quick rundown is essentially amino acids are like a recipe with lots of different ingredients. And some foods have all of these ingredients that you need to get that full gram of protein. Eggs and a lot of lean meats have all that protein. But if you're missing one of those parts of the amino acids, you don't get the full block of protein. Imagine you were baking a cake and the recipe called for 4 eggs, 500 grams of flour, and 200 grams of sugar. Now you only have 2 eggs, but you have all the other ingredients. You can't make the entire cake. You have to half the recipe because of the minimum ingredients you've got. And that's what happens with a lot of nuts, seeds, and plant-based proteins, is they don't have all the amino acids you need to be absorbed by the body, like that cake analogy. And so you'll only be getting part of the cake instead of the whole thing, because one of the ingredients is falling short. So it may seem on paper that some nuts have got 10 grams worth of protein, but in actuality, our bodies can only absorb 3 grams of that. There are some ways to work around this, and I'm not going to talk about them, so you can see this video also in the description below. Let's say you really don't want any muscle. What's another way to lose some of that fat or that wood in the corner? Well, you could just bring in slightly less wood. This is one of the most effective ways to progressively lose fat that isn't sudden and won't cause any negative effects in the long run. So instead of bringing in 3 blocks of wood, you bring in 2 and you supplement with 1 from the corner. This will take more time, as every day you're only using 1 block of wood out of the 100 or whatever that you have there. But eventually, slow and steady progress will mean that you will lose all that fat. Now, a lot of people might think, okay, well, I could just stop bringing in wood completely and I'll use that pile of wood in the corner. Yes, that will work. However, it'll have a lot of the issues from the previous one, where you rebound too hard, and also potentially your body might end up digging into the walls of the cabin and putting that into the fire, and you'll lose muscle mass in that particular situation. Let's ditch the wood analogy and figure out how to actually get the right amount of calories in and what to do with them. First, you need to figure out how much energy roughly your body burns in a day. You can do this by finding a TDEE calculator online. That's total daily energy expenditure. You input your weight, your height, your exercise level, and be honest with yourself. And it'll tell you how many calories your body burns in a day just for you staying alive, and how much you need to eat or drop to if you want to lose weight or put on weight. Now, this is kind of accurate, but not super accurate. It's the average for the population. You might end up actually burning less calories to sit at your body weight, or you might end up burning more to sit at your body weight. And so it's going to take a little bit of finicking and understanding yourself and seeing how you respond to the way you eat to know how many calories you actually burn in a day. So once you've found how many calories you roughly burn in a day, you want to essentially just go moderately below that. Or if you're trying to put on muscle mass, probably eat around the same and just train harder. Now, you can't make a difference if you don't know how you're currently eating. The 3 different macronutrients we have are protein, fat, and carbs. As I said earlier, sometimes these are villainized. Even protein has been villainized in the past. Don't treat any of these different macronutrients as a villain. They are not inherently bad. And in fact, unless you're taking some exogenous hormones, some steroids, your body needs all 3 to be able to function properly and healthily. Now, the issue for a lot of people is they tend to eat too many carbs or too much fat and not enough protein. And a lot of people overcorrect this by trying to cut out the carbs or the fat completely and upping it. Instead, what you can just do is change the ratios, move up protein and drop fat and carbs a little bit.
See, a lot of people end up eating
like 80% of their diet is carbohydrates. You know, they just eat pasta, bread constantly and nothing else on top of that. And they feel horrible, they put on a lot of fat and they just feel disgusting. So then what they'll do is they'll overcorrect and cut out carbs completely and replace that with protein and fat. They would have probably got even better results and felt even better if they just balanced their diet instead of cutting out a macronutrient entirely. The problem is not the fact that they're eating carbs, they're not evil, it's that they were eating too many carbs. Now, because we're trying to stay satiated and lose fat potentially, I would say the most important thing is getting enough whole protein chains, because it'll leave us satiated and it's important for our body to function healthily. A great way to figure out how much protein you need is take your body weight in pounds, take that number, and eat that many grams of protein. Okay, so what does that mean? If you weigh 187 pounds, you should eat 187 grams of protein. This is going to be more than you actually think, and so you need to track it by using something like MyFitnessPal. This will allow you to see how many calories you eat in a day, how much protein, and how much carbs and fat you're having in a day. Don't worry too much about carbs and fat, just make sure it's somewhat balanced, and make sure you're getting proteins and the right amount of calories in. Now, in case you don't know, macronutrients aren't exactly what you think they are. In a steak, for instance, you might eat 200 grams of steak and think you're getting in 200 grams of protein. In reality, not all of that is going to be protein. It'll probably be about 30 to 40% of it. And so, likely in your 200 grams of steak, you'll actually be getting 60 grams of protein. And so you need to take that into account. And this is where using MyFitnessPal helps a lot. You need to also make sure you're tracking drinks, sauces, and oils, because a lot of the time there's hidden calories in these that we don't even account for. You might put a couple tablespoons of olive oil into a dish and not track it, but each of those tablespoons of olive oil has got almost 120 calories in it. Now, a lot of people think of food as good or bad. This isn't really the case. Our bodies are a lot more robust than we think they are. No food is particularly bad, but some are good. The issue comes with the way our body responds to a lot of food. Because of this misconception, what a lot of people will do is they'll assume everything they've been eating beforehand has been bad and everything they need to eat is actually good. So for some, a burger might be bad, but for others, a burger is good. A burger's got tons of protein, it's high in calories if you're trying to put on weight, and it's relatively balanced as long as the ingredients aren't too bad. You're getting some micronutrients and a decent balance of macronutrients. But a lot of people perceive burgers as being this outrageously evil food. It isn't. So what a lot of people do is they eat things they hate to try lose weight and cut out everything they love. This is not going to work in the long run. You need to be able to do something that sustains for a long period of time. Eat foods you enjoy that fit into your goals. So make sure you're getting enough protein, but don't cut out things that you like. You don't have to eat unseasoned chicken and broccoli and cauliflower. You can season the chicken, you can put some sauces on it, make sure you track them, and you can make it taste good. You can put it into wraps, burritos, make chicken burgers, whatever, as long as it fits your goals. When I was a kid, I was forced to eat a lot of vegetables that I really didn't like, and my parents would give me strange, like experimental food, and I didn't want to eat it, and they'd get mad at me and call me a fussy eater. Whereas if they just asked me, hey, do you like cauliflower? I would have said no. If they'd asked me, what do you like? I'd have said broccoli, carrots, and chicken breasts. And guess what? If they'd given me that, I would have eaten my vegetables instead of the stuff I was given, like cauliflower and Brussels sprouts. If you really don't like a food, don't eat it. You don't have to do things you hate in order to get into better shape. You just have to change the way you eat. You don't have to hate your diet because some actor has told you that they've got in shape by eating nothing but bland chicken and rice. Instead, you can get 80% of the results with 20% of their diet. Instead, you can just eat well enough to get enough results. There's this thing called the Pareto principle, where 20% of your results come from 20% of your actions. So 20% of your food that you eat will give you 80% of your results. Now you can push to get to that 50, 60, 70, 80% for that last little 20% of improvement. But if you eat 20% as well as these actors do, you'll probably get to like 80% of their physique, as long as you're getting in the right amount of nutrients that you need. Now again, food isn't necessarily bad, but there are some trades for a few different things. A lot of food, like fast food, has seed oils in it. And these seed oils, while not necessarily terrible, cause a lot of inflammation in the body. And this will do a couple different things. So while calorically the seed oil isn't going to inherently make you put on more weight, because your body gets so inflamed, it doesn't perform as well. And so you won't be able to exercise as intensely, your body won't move as much, your total daily energy expenditure may drop, and you'll end up putting on more weight as a result. Inflammation is also a big cause of a lot of anxiety and depression.
You've likely experienced this. When you eat fast food and afterwards you feel all anxious and your joints ache and just everything feels a little bit strange. The reason for that is because your inflammation is through the roof, because that fast food was likely fried in some seed oils, maybe some canola oil, and that's caused you to feel that way.
And I experimented with this recently for 3 months, eating quite a lot of seed oil in my food. Not an excessive amount, but I ate about the same amount of calories as I normally would, but with seed oil. My body didn't take a massive hit in the way I looked. However, mentally, I felt a lot more anxious all the time. There was just constantly thoughts running through my head, and I just had this constant buzz of anxiety. In the last few weeks, I've cut it out almost entirely and switched back to healthy oils like avocado, olive oil, and butter as my fat sources, and it has almost removed the anxiety completely. So how do you tell if an oil is good or bad? Essentially look at the way it's processed. If the base ingredient for it is already quite oily and fatty, it's probably going to be a much better, higher quality oil than something which isn't very oily and fatty and has to be extremely processed to become an oil. Avocados, olives, and butter are all similarly close to their base ingredients. Olives are very oily and fatty, and avocado is very oily and fatty, and so that oil doesn't have to go through much processing, as opposed to canola and other seeds, which, if you see the process in which they're made, takes a lot of factory work, which strips them of plenty of nutrients.
Now, you can't just eat enough protein and then do whatever you want with the rest of your diet. There are a few caveats. If you decided that after you hit your protein goal, all you wanted to eat was sugar, you'd be in for a pretty bad time, because eating an excessive amount of sugar could lead to insulin resistance and even type 2 diabetes. Let me explain. See, the carbohydrates we eat are converted into glucose, which are then transported around our body through our bloodstream. And this is what our cells use as an energy source in order to function. Glucose is literally that hot burning wood in the fire. It's the thing that we use to exist and run our everyday life. So our bodies produce a hormone called insulin inside of the pancreas. And the role of insulin is to take that glucose and move it into our cells. It's like a doormat. Now, like protein, not all carbs are created equal, and our bodies don't react the same way to all the different carbs we eat. Some are absorbed and turned into glucose much quicker than others, and this is measured in the glycemic index. The higher the GI score, the quicker your body converts those carbohydrates into glucose, and the more insulin your body has to produce to deal with it. This is what often causes that spike in energy and that big crash that comes after you eat white bread or sugar. 100 on the glycemic index is based on pure glucose, but another food that has that same level of conversion is white bread. So when you eat white bread, your blood sugar spikes at exactly the same level as eating pure glucose. While sugar only has a GI of 68, which is high, but not as high as white bread. The problem with sugar is it's really easy to eat a lot of it, and it causes a lot of cravings. Because our brains have adapted to want to eat sweet things because we know we get a lot of energy from it. And you're usually not also eating pure sugar. You're having it in a cake or a cookie, which is made with white flour, which also spikes your glycogen levels. Now, sugar isn't bad in moderate doses, but if you're constantly eating sugar and high GI, your pancreas becomes overworked. And when it gets overworked, it does what we all do when we get overworked. It burns out and stops working properly. Now, you won't notice that your pancreas isn't producing the same amount of insulin it always was. And so you're probably going to continue to eat exactly the same way you did. But now your body isn't making enough insulin to deal with all that glucose in your blood. And so you end up with high blood sugar. And high blood sugar is very bad for the body. It causes cell damage, organ failure, and over time your circulation decreases, which is why a lot of diabetics end up losing limbs. That's a bit of a fucking hectic one. So you want to generally eat foods that are relatively low in GI. A good rule of thumb for this is the more a carb is refined and processed, the higher it will be on the glycemic index. And this causes a lot of these issues. Now, why is this? Because in the process of making these foods more palatable or lasting longer, they're stripped of their fats, fiber, fructose, and lactose, which are all parts of the overall food which slow your body's absorption and don't cause your blood sugar to spike as much. So now you may have noticed a theme, from cooking oils to the carbs we eat and even the protein. The more human intervention, the more processing and refinement, the less our body knows how to absorb it and the more problems it causes. And this may make me sound like a fucking conspiracy theorist, but there's so much data and anecdotal evidence to prove it. The food we eat should be as close to its natural source as it possibly can be. And anything beyond that
causes damage or some kind of suboptimal absorption of the food. So having a slice of cake every now and again shouldn't be a massive problem. But if your entire diet is made out of sugary, highly inflammatory processed foods, you're not going to be working as best as you could. If you're trying to get in shape, alcohol is also not necessarily a good idea because people forget that alcohol has calories. In fact, it's quite calorically dense. It has more calories per gram than both carbs and protein, and only 2 calories less per gram than fat. Alcohol also kind of acts as a poison for a lot of our bodily functions. It decreases muscle protein synthesis, meaning the protein we eat doesn't get converted into muscle as easily. And it slows down your metabolism, so you're not going to burn as many calories just existing. It weakens your immune system, so you're more likely to get sick, and it causes damage to your brain and other organs over time. Not to mention, if you get drunk, you're more likely to binge eat, and it's going to cause a hangover, which is going to make you less likely to train and also more likely to break your diet and eat like shit. When I first started writing this video many months ago, I initially intended for it to be a sequel to Don't Overcomplicate Bodybuilding. The plan was to just say, don't overcomplicate your diet, eat whatever you want, and you'll get in shape. Clearly, it isn't that simple. Over 30 minutes of yapping. Hell yeah. After putting in a lot of research, I discovered that there's a lot of intricacies that you need to understand. And while the fundamentals remain simple, if you eat more calories than you burn, you're gonna put on weight. If you eat less calories, you're gonna lose some weight. There are so many little tiny bits that need to be taken into consideration. Bodybuilding can be simplified because it's your actions that determine your results. And the only battle you really have to fight against is the battle of information. What you take in which dictates your actions. The issue with food is the quality you're getting comes from somewhere else. Now, of course, humans all have to eat, and we always will. And therefore, that's an industry that's gonna be very profitable and have a very large market. You can't get away with being a person and not eating. And so, of course, some companies are going to take advantage of that in a negative way. It becomes quite challenging to say, just eat whatever you want, when so much of the food we eat has been like weaponized and changed and bastardized to become something else for the gains of other people. Literally, a lot of the food we eat is made to be more palatable and literally addictive, acting on the same chemical pathways that drugs use. Because of this, lots of industries have spread lies and rumors, like Big Sugar spreading lies about fat in the past, saying that fat was causing heart disease and downplaying the role that sugar was having on heart disease. And this is causing a lot of problems because it's a confusing mess. And this kind of misinformation and marketing is also spread over to the supplement industry, where a lot of people believe that supplements are the be-all and end-all of getting in shape. I've had so many people come up to me in the gym and say, what supplements do you use? I'd like to take those supplements as well. And they look gobsmacked when I tell them I don't take any supplements, because they've just been sold a lie. And I think there's one principle to take from this. And it's not that you need to cut out everything in your life and go on these elimination diets where you only eat like a caveman from 5,000 years ago, because that's not gonna work. We don't live in that world anymore. You don't have to villainize a Big Mac or a cake or something like that. You can still eat those things occasionally. But the bulk and the majority of your diet should be made up of whole, healthy foods that are as close to their original source as possible so that your body can actually function properly. Our digestive systems are not designed to take highly processed stuff. We're not designed to have pure refined sugar. We're not designed to have pure refined wheat or seed oils in bulk. And if you want to feel well and be able to improve and reach a point where the food you're eating isn't damaging you so you can continue to live properly, try to make sure at least 80 to 90% of your diet is made up of real food. Thank you very much for watching, and Godspeed. About a year ago, I found myself the busiest I'd been in my entire life. I couldn't spend as much time in the gym as I always had, and as a result, my physique and my training suffered. And when I spoke to my training partners, they were going through exactly the same thing. So when we looked online and tried to find training programs that fit into that, there was one thing lacking. You didn't hit legs, and I need to do leg training. So anyway, we decided to make our own. And you can buy that in the description below. If you don't want to buy it, I created a free workout plan that's been used by over 130,000 people, and that'll also be linked below. Thank you very much for your support.